The horn sounded again. Other people were hurrying toward the plaza. The dragon drifted ahead of them like a shark heading toward a wayward airbed, its tail flicking slowly from side to side. Some loony is going to fight it, said Nobby. I thought someone would have a go, said Colin. Poor bugger will be baked in its own armor. This seemed to be the opinion of the crowds lining the plaza. The people of Ankh-Morpork had a straightforward, no-nonsense approach to entertainment, and while they were looking forward to seeing a dragon slain, they'd be happy to settle instead for someone being baked alive in his own armor. You didn't get the chance every day to see someone baked alive in their own armor. It would be something for the children to remember. Vimes was jostled and bounced around by the crowd as more people flooded into the plaza behind them. The horn sounded a third challenge. That's a slug horn, that is, said Colin knowledgeably. Like a toxin, only deeper. You sure? Said Nobby. Yup. It must have been a bloody big slug. Peanuts, figgins, hot sausages, whined a voice behind them. Hello, lads. Hello, Captain Vimes. In at the death, eh? Have a sausage on the house. What's going on, Throat? Said Vimes, clinging to the vendor's tray as more people spilled around them. Some kid's ridden into the city and said he'd kill the dragon, said Cut Me Own Throat. Got a magic sword, he says. Has he got a magic skin? You've got no romance in your soul, Captain, said Throat, removing a very hot toasting fork from the tiny frying pan on his tray and applying it gently to the buttock of a large woman in front of him. Stand aside, madam. Commerce is the lifeblood of the city. Thank you very much, of course, he continued. By rights, there should be a maiden chained to a rock. Only the aunt said no. That's the trouble with some people. No sense of tradition. This lad says he's the rightful heir, too. Vimes shook his head. The world was definitely going mad around him. You've lost me there, he said. Heir, said Throat patiently. You know, heir to the throne. What throne? The throne of Ankh. You know, what throne of Ankh? You know, kings and that. Throat looked reflective. Wish I knew what his bloody name is, he said. I put an order into Ignatius the Troll all-night wholesale pottery for 3 gross of coronation mugs, and it's going to be a right pain painting all the names in afterward. Shall I put you down for a couple, Captain? To you, 90 pence, and that's cutting me own throat. Vimes gave up and shoved his way back through the throng, using Carrot as a lighthouse. The lance constable loomed over the crowd, and the rest of the rank had anchored themselves to him. It's all gone mad, he shouted. What's going on, Carrot? There's a lad on a horse in the middle of the plaza, said Carrot. He's got a glittery sword, you know. Doesn't seem to be doing much at the moment, though. Vimes fought his way into the lee of Lady Ramkin. Kings, he panted, of Ankh and thrones. Are there? What? Oh, yes, there used to be, said Lady Ramkin. Hundreds of years ago. Why?
Some kid says he's heir to the throne.
That's right, said Throat, who'd followed Vimes in the hope of clinching a sale. He made a big speech about how he was going to kill the dragon, overthrow the usurpers, and right all wrongs. Everyone cheered. Hot sausages, 2 for $1, made of guinea pig. Why not buy one for the lady? Don't you mean pork, sir? Said Carrot warily, eyeing the glistening tubes. Manner of speaking, said Throat quickly. Certainly your actual pig products. Genuine pig.
Everyone hears any speech in this city, growled Vimes. It doesn't mean anything.
Get your pig sausages, 5 for $2, said Throat, who never let a conversation stand in the way of trade. Could be good for business, could be monarchy, pig sausages in a bun, and righting all wrongs too. Sounds like a solid idea to me, with onions.
Can I press you to a hot sausage, ma'am?
Said Nobby. Lady Ramkin looked at the tray around Throat's neck. Thousands of years of good breeding came to her aid, and there was only the faintest suggestion of horror in her voice when she said, My, they look good. What splendid foodstuffs.
Are they made by monks on some mystic mountain?
Said Carrot. Throat gave him an odd look. No, he said patiently. By pigs.
What's wrongs?
Said Vimes urgently.
Come on, tell me. What wrongs is he going to right?
Well, said Throat, there's, taxes. That's wrong for a start. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Paying taxes was something that, in Throat's world, happened only to other people. That's right, said an old woman next to him. And the gutter of my house leaks something dreadful, and the landlord won't do nothing. That's wrong.
And premature baldness,
said the man in front of her.
That's wrong too.
Vime's mouth dropped open.
Kings can cure that, you know,
said another proto-monarchist knowingly. As a matter of fact, said Throat, rummaging in his pack, I've got 1 bottle left of this astonishing ointment. What is made, he glared at Carrot, by some ancient monks who live on a mountain.
And they can't answer back, you know,
the monarchist went on.
That's how you can tell they're royal, completely incapable of it. It's to do with being gracious.
Fancy, said the leaky, guttering woman.
Money, too,
said the monarchist, enjoying the attention.
They don't carry it. That's how you can always tell a king. Why, it's not that heavy,
said the man whose remaining hair was spread across the dome of his head like the remnant of a defeated army.
I can carry hundreds of dollars, no problem.
You probably get weak arms being a king, said the woman wisely. Probably with waving.
I've always thought,
said the monarchist, pulling out a pipe and beginning to fill it with the ponderous air of one who is going to deliver a lecture,
that one of the major problems of being a king is the risk of your daughter getting a prick.
There was a thoughtful pause.
And falling asleep for 100 years,
the monarchist went on stolidly. Ah, said the others, unaccountably relieved.
And then there's wear and tear on peas, he added.
Well, there would be, said the woman uncertainly.
Having to sleep on them all the time,
said the monarchist. Not to mention hundreds of mattresses.
Right.
Is that so? I think I could get him for him wholesale, said Throat. He turned to Vimes, who had been listening to all this with leaden depression. See, Captain, and you'd be in the Royal Guard, I expect. Get some plumes in your helmet.
Ah, pageantry,
said the monarchist, pointing with his pipe.
Very important.
Lots of spectacles.
What?
Free, said Throat.
Well, I think you have to pay for the frames,
said the monarchist.
You're all bloody mad, shouted Vimes. You don't know anything about him, and he hasn't even won yet.
Bit of a formality, I expect, said the woman.
It's a fire-breathing dragon,
screamed Vimes, remembering those nostrils.
And he's just a guy on a horse, for heaven's sake.
Throat prodded him gently in the breastplate. You got no soul, Captain, he said. When a stranger comes into the city under the thrall of the dragon and challenges it with a glittery sword, well, there's only one outcome, ain't there? It's probably destiny.
Thrall, shouted Vimes. Thrall, you thieving bugger, Throat. You were flogging cuddly dragon dolls yesterday.
That was just business, Captain. No need to get excited about it, said Throat pleasantly. Vimes went back to the rank in a gloomy rage. Say what you liked about the people of Ankh-Morpork, they had always been staunchly independent, yielding to no man the right to rob, defraud, embezzle, and murder on an equal basis. This seemed absolutely right to Vimes' way of thinking. There was no difference at all between the richest man and the poorest beggar, apart from the fact that the former had lots of money, food, power, fine clothes, and good health, but at least he wasn't any better, just richer, fatter, more powerful, better dressed, and healthier. It had been like that for hundreds of years.
And now they get one sniff of an ermine robe, and they go all gooey,
he muttered. The dragon was circling the plaza slowly and warily. Vimes craned to see over the heads in front of him. In the same way that various predators have the silhouettes of their prey almost programmed into their genes, it was possible that the shape of someone on a horse holding a sword clicked a few tumblers in a dragon's brain. It was showing keen but wary interest. Back in the crowd, Vimes shrugged.
I didn't even know we were a kingdom.
Well, we haven't been for ages, said Lady Ramkin. The king has got thrown out, and jolly good job, too. They could be quite frightful.
But you're, well, from a high-born family, he said. I should have thought you'd be all for kings.
Some of them were fearful oiks, you know, she said airily. Wives all over the place, and chopping people's heads off, fighting pointless wars, eating with their knife, chucking half-eaten chicken legs over their shoulders, that sort of thing. Not our sort of people at all. The plaza went quiet. The dragon had flapped slowly to the far end and was almost stationary in the air, apart from the slow beating of its wings. Vimes felt something claw gently at his back, and then Errol was on his shoulder, gripping with his hind claws. His stubby wings were beating in time with those of the bigger specimen. He was hissing. His eyes were fixed on the hovering bulk. The boy's horse jigged nervously on the plaza's flagstones as he dismounted, flourished the sword, and turned to face the distant enemy.
He certainly looks confident, Vimes told himself. On the other hand, how does the ability to slay dragons fit you for kingship in this day and age? It was certainly a very shiny sword. You had to admit that.
And now it was 2 o'clock of the following morning, and all was well, apart from the rain. It was drizzling again. There are some towns in the multiverse which think they know how to have a good time. Places like New Orleans and Rio reckon they not only know how to push the boat out, but set fire to the harbor as well. But compared to Ankh-Morpork, with its hair down, they're a Welsh village at 2 p.m. on a wet Sunday afternoon. Fireworks banged and sparkled in the damp air over the turbid mud of the River Ankh. Various domesticated animals were being roasted in the streets. Dancers congaed from house to house, often managing to pick up any loose ornaments while doing so. There was a lot of quaffing going on. People who, in normal circumstances, would never think of doing it were shouting, "Hurrah!" Vimes stalked gloomily through the crowded streets, feeling like the only pickled onion in a fruit salad. He'd given the rank the evening off. He wasn't feeling at all royalist. He didn't think he had anything against kings and such, but the sight of Ankh-Morporkians waving flags was mysteriously upsetting. That was something only silly subject people did in other countries. Besides, the idea of royal plumes in his hat revolted him. He'd always had a thing about plumes. Plumes sort of, well, bought you off, told everyone that you didn't belong to yourself, and he'd feel like a bird. It'd be the last straw. His errant feet led him back to the yard. After all, where else was there? His lodgings were depressing, and his landlady had complained about the holes which, despite much shouting, Errol kept making in the carpet, and the smell Errol made. And Vimes couldn't drink in a tavern tonight without seeing things that would upset him even more than the things he normally saw when he was drunk. It was nice and quiet, although the distant sounds of revelry could be heard through the window. Errol scrambled down from his shoulder and started to eat the coke in the fireplace. Vimes sat back and put his feet up. What a day! And what a fight! The dodging, the weaving, the shouts of the crowd, the young man standing there looking tiny and unprotected, the dragon taking a deep breath in a way now very familiar to Vimes. And not flaming. That had surprised Vimes. It had surprised the crowd. It had certainly surprised the dragon, which had tried to squint at its own nose and clawed desperately at its flame ducts. It had remained surprised right up to the moment when the lad ducked in under one claw and thrust the sword home. And then a thunderclap. You'd have thought there'd have been some bits of dragon left, really. Vimes pulled a scrap of paper toward him. He looked at the note he'd made yesterday.
Item, heavy dragon, but yet it can fly right well. Item, the fire be main hot, yet issueth from ain living thing. Item, the swamp dragons be right poor things, yet this monstrous form waxeth full mightily. Item, from whence it cometh, none know, nor whither it goeth, nor where it biddeth between times. Item, whyfore did it burneth so neatly?
He pulled the pen and ink toward him, and in a slow, around hand added,
Item, can a dragon be destroyed into utterly nothing?
He thought for a while and continued,
Item, whyfore did it explode, that none may find it? Search they greatly.
a puzzler that. Lady Ramkin said that when a swamp dragon exploded, there was dragon everywhere. And this one had been a damn great thing. Admittedly, its insides must have been an alchemical nightmare, but the citizens of Ankh-Morpork should still have been spending the night shoveling dragon off the streets. No one seemed to have bothered about this. The purple smoke was quite impressive, though. Errol finished off the coke and started on the fire irons. So far this evening, he had eaten 3 cobblestones, a doorknob, something unidentifiable he'd found in the gutter, and, to general astonishment, 3 of cut-me-own-throat sausages made of genuine pork organs. The crunching of the poker going down mingled with the patter of rain on the windows. Vimes stared at the paper again and then wrote,
Item, how can kings come of nothing?
He hadn't even seen the lad close to. He looked personable enough, not exactly a great thinker, but definitely the kind of profile you wouldn't mind seeing on your small change. Mind you, after killing the dragon, he could have been a cross-eyed goblin for all that it mattered. The mob had borne him in triumph to the patrician's palace. Lord Vetinari had been locked up in his own dungeons. He hadn't put up much fight, apparently, just smiled at everyone and went quickly. What a happy coincidence for the city that, just when it needed a champion to kill the dragon, a king came forth. Vimes turned this thought over for a while, then he turned it back to front. He picked up the quill and wrote,
Item, what a happy chance it be for a lad that would be king, that there be a dragon to slay, to prove beyond doubt his bony fides.
It was a lot better than birthmarks and swords. That was for sure. He twiddled the quill for a while and then doodled.
Item, the dragon was not a mechanical device, yet surely no wizard has the power to create a beast of that magnet size. Item, why, in the pinch, could it not flame? Item, where did it come from? Item, where did it go?
The rain pounded harder on the window. The sounds of celebration became distinctly damp and then faded completely. There was a murmur of thunder. Vimes underlined go several times. After further consideration, he added 2 more question marks. After staring at the effect for some time, he rolled the paper into a ball and threw it into the fireplace, where it was fielded and swallowed by Errol. There had been a crime. Senses Vimes didn't know he possessed, ancient policeman senses, prickled the hairs on his neck and told him there had been a crime. It was probably such an odd crime that it didn't figure anywhere in Carrot's book, but it had been committed, all right. A handful of high-temperature murders was only the start of it. He'd find it and give it a name. Then he stood up, took his leather rain cape from its hook behind the door, and stepped out into the naked city. This is where the dragons went. They lie, not dead, not asleep, not waiting, because waiting implies expectation. Possibly the word we're looking for here is angry. It could remember the feel of real air under its wings and the sheer pleasure of the flame. There had been empty skies above and an interesting world below, full of strange running creatures. Existence had a different texture there, a better texture. And just when it was beginning to enjoy it, it had been crippled, stopped from flaming, and whipped back like some hairy canine mammal. The world had been taken away from it. In the reptilian synapses of the dragon's mind, the suggestion was kindled that, just possibly, it could get the world back. It had been summoned and disdainfully banished again, but perhaps there was a trail, a scent, a thread which would lead it to the sky. Perhaps there was a pathway of thought itself. It recalled a mind, the peevish voice, so full of its own diminutive importance, a mind almost like that of a dragon, but on a tiny, tiny scale. Ah, it stretched its wings. Lady Ramkin made herself a cup of cocoa and listened to the rain gurgling in the pipes outside. She slipped off the hated dancing shoes, which even she was prepared to concede were like a pair of pink canoes. But nobilis oblige was, as the funny little sergeant would say, and as the last representative of one of Ankh Morpork's oldest families, she'd had to go to the victory ball to show willing. Lord Vetinari seldom had balls. There was a popular song about it, in fact, but now it was going to be balls all the way. She couldn't stand balls. For sheer enjoyment, it wasn't a patch on mucking out dragons. You knew where you were mucking out dragons. You didn't get hot and pink and have to eat silly things on sticks or wear a dress that made you look like a cloud full of cherubs. Little dragons didn't give a damn what you looked like, so long as there was a feeding bowl in your hands. Funny, really. She'd always thought it took weeks, months to organize a ball. Invitations, decorations, sausages on poles, ghastly chickeny mixture to force into those little pastry cases. But it had all been done in a matter of hours, as if someone had been expecting it. One of the miracles of catering, obviously. She'd even danced with the, for want of a better word, new king, who had said some polite words to her, although they had been rather muffled. And a coronation tomorrow. You'd have thought it'd take months to sort out. She was still musing on that as she mixed the dragon's late night feed of rock oil and peat spiked with flowers of sulfur. She didn't bother to change out of the ball gown, but slipped the heavy apron over the top, donned the gloves and helmet, pulled the visor down over her face, and ran, clutching the feed buckets, through the driving rain to the shed. She knew it as soon as she opened the door. Normally, the arrival of food would be greeted with hoots and whistles and brief bursts of flame. The dragons, each in its pen, were sitting up in attentive silence and staring up through the roof. It was somehow scary. She clanged the buckets together. No need to be afraid, nasty big dragon, all gone, she said brightly. Get stuck into this, you people. One or two of them gave her a brief glance and then went back to their what? They didn't seem to be frightened, just very, very attentive. It was like a vigil. They were waiting for something to happen. The thunder muttered again. A couple of minutes later, she was on her way down into the damp city. There are some songs which are never sung sober. Nellie Dean is one. So is any song beginning, "As I was a walking." In the area around Ankh-Morpork, the favorite air is, "A wizard staff has a knob on the end." The rank were drunk. At least 2 out of 3 of the rank were drunk. Carrot had been persuaded to try a shandy and hadn't liked it much. He didn't know all the words either, and many of the ones he did know he didn't understand. "Oh, I see," he said eventually. "It's a sort of humorous play on words, is it?" "You know," said Colin wistfully, peering into the thickening mists rolling in off the Ankh. "At times like this, I wish old—" "You're not to say it," said Nobby, swaying a little. "You agreed we wouldn't say nothing. It's no good talking about it." "It was his favorite song," said Colin sadly. "He was a good light tenor. Now, Sarge, he was a righteous man, or Gaskin," said Colin. "We couldn't have helped it," said Nobby sulkily. "We could have," said Colin. "We could have run faster." "What happened then?" said Carrot. "He died," said Nobby, "in the execution of his duty." "I told him," said Colin, taking a swig at the bottle they had brought along to see them through the night. "I told him, slow down. I said, you'll do yourself a mischief. I said, I don't know what got into him running ahead like that. I blame the Thieves Guild," said Nobby, "allowing people like that on the streets. There was this bloke we sold down a robbery one night," said Colin miserably, "right in front of us. And Captain Vimes, he said, 'Come on.' And we run. Only the point is, you shouldn't run too fast, see? Else you might catch them. Leads to all sorts of problems, catching people." "They don't like it," said Nobby. There was a mutter of thunder and a flurry of rain. "They don't like it," agreed Colin. "But Gaskin went and forgot. He ran on, went around the corner, and, well, this bloke had a couple of mates waiting." "It was his heart, really," said Nobby. "Well, anyway, and there he was," said Colin. "Captain Vimes was very upset about it. 'You shouldn't run fast in the watch, lad,' he said solemnly. 'You can be a fast guard, or you can be an old guard, but you can't be a fast old guard.' Poor old Gaskin." "It didn't ought to be like that," said Carrot. Colin took a pull at the bottle. "Well, it is," he said. Rain bounced on his helmet and trickled down his face. "But it didn't ought to be," said Carrot flatly. "But it is," said Colin. Someone else in the city was also ill at ease. He was the librarian. Sergeant Cullen had given him a badge. The librarian turned it around and around in his big, gentle hands, nibbling at it. It wasn't that the city suddenly had a king. Orangs are traditionalists, and you couldn't get more traditional than a king, but they also liked things neat, and things weren't neat, or rather, they were too neat. Truth and reality were never as neat as this. Sudden heirs to ancient thrones didn't grow on trees, and he should know. Besides, no one was looking for his book. That was human priorities for you. The book was the key to it. He was sure of that. Well, there was one way to find out what was in the book. It was a perilous way, but the librarian ambled along perilous ways all day. In the silence of the sleeping library, he opened his desk and removed from its deepest recesses a small lantern carefully built to prevent any naked flame being exposed. You couldn't be too careful with all this paper around. He also took a bag of peanuts and, after some thought, a large ball of string. He bit off a short length of the string and used it to tie the badge around his neck, like a talisman. Then he tied one end of the ball to the desk and, after a moment's contemplation, knuckled off between the bookshelves, paying out the string behind him. Knowledge equals power. The string was important. After a while, the librarian stopped. He concentrated all his powers of librarianship. Power equals energy. People were stupid sometimes. They thought the library was a dangerous place because of all the magical books, which was true enough. But what made it really one of the most dangerous places there could ever be was the simple fact that it was a library. Energy equals matter. He swung into an avenue of shelving that was apparently a few feet long and walked along it briskly for half an hour. Matter equals mass. And mass distorts space. It distorts it into polyfractal L space. So while the Dewey system has its fine points, when you're setting out to look something up in the multidimensional folds of L space, what you really need is a ball of string. Now, the rain was trying hard. It glistened off the flagstones in the plaza of Brook and Moons, littered here and there with torn bunting, flags, broken bottles, and the occasional regurgitated supper. There was still plenty of thunder about, and a green, fresh smell in the air. A few shreds of mist from the Ankh hovered over the stones. It would be dawn soon. Vime's footsteps echoed wetly from the surrounding buildings as he picked his way across the plaza. The boy had stood here. He peered through the mist shreds at the surrounding buildings, getting his bearings. So the dragon had been hovering. He paced forward. Here.
And,
said Vimes,
this is where it was killed.
He fumbled in his pockets. There were all sorts of things in there. Keys, bits of string, corks. His finger closed on a stub end of chalk. He knelt down. Errol jumped off his shoulder and waddled away to inspect the detritus of the celebration. He always sniffed everything before he ate it. Vimes noticed. It was a bit of a puzzle why he bothered, because he always ate it anyways. Its head had been about, let's see, here. He walked backward, dragging the chalk over the stones, progressing slowly over the damp, empty square like an ancient worshipper treading a maze. Here, a wing, curving away toward a tail which stretched out to here. Change hands. Now head for the other wing. When he finished, he walked to the center of the outline and ran his hands over the stones. He realized he was half expecting them to be warm. Surely there should be something. He didn't know, some grease or something? Some crispy fried dragon lumps? Errol started eating a broken bottle with every sign of enjoyment.
You know what I think?
Said Vimes.
I think it went somewhere.
Thunder rolled again.
All right,
Muttered Vimes.
it was just a thought. It wasn't that dramatic.
Errol stopped in mid-crunch. Very slowly, as though it was mounted on very smooth, well-oiled bearings, the dragon's head turned to face upward. What it was staring at intently was a patch of empty air. There wasn't much else you could say about it. Vimes shivered under his cape. This was daft.
Look, don't muck about,
he said.
There's nothing there.
Errol started to tremble.
It's just the rain,
said Vimes.
Go on, finish your bottle. Nice bottle.
A thin, worried, keening noise broke from the dragon's mouth.
I'll show you,
said Vimes. He cast around and spotted one of Throat's sausages, cast aside by a hungry reveler who had decided he was never going to be that hungry. He picked it up.
Look,
he said, and threw it upward. He felt sure, watching its trajectory, that it ought to have fallen back to the ground. It shouldn't have fallen away, as if he'd dropped it neatly into a tunnel in the sky. And the tunnel shouldn't have been looking back at him. Vivid purple lightning lashed from the empty air and struck the houses on the near side of the plaza, skittering across the walls for several yards before winking out with a suddenness that almost denied that it had ever happened at all. Then it erupted again, this time hitting the rimward wall. The light broke where it hit into a network of searching tendrils spreading across the stones. The third attempt went upward, forming an actinic column that eventually rose 50 or 60 feet in the air, appeared to stabilize, and started to spin slowly. Vimes felt that a comment was called for. He said,
"Arr!"
As the light revolved, it sent out thin zigzag streamers that jittered away across the rooftops, sometimes dipping, sometimes doubling back, searching. Errol ran up Vimes' back in a flurry of claws and fastened himself firmly on his shoulder. The excruciating agony recalled to Vimes that there was something he should be doing. Was it that time to scream again? He tried another. No, probably not. The air started to smell like burning tin. Lady Ramkin's coach rattled into the plaza, making a noise like a roulette wheel, and pounded straight for Vimes, stopping in a skid that sent it juddering around in a semicircle and forced the horses either to face the other way or plate their legs. A furious vision in padded leather, gauntlets, tiara, and 30 yards of damp pink tulle leaned down toward him and screamed, "Come on, you bloody idiot!" One glove caught him under his unresisting shoulder and hauled him bodily onto the box. "And stop screaming," the Phantom ordered, focusing generations of natural authority into 4 syllables. Another shout spurred the horses from a bewildering standing start to a full gallop. The coach bounced away over the flagstones. An exploratory tendril of flickering light brushed the reins for a moment and then lost interest.
"I suppose you haven't got any idea what's happening?"
shouted Vimes against the crackling of the spinning fire.
"Not the foggiest."
The crawling lines spread like a web over the city, growing fainter with distance. Vimes imagined them creeping through windows and sneaking under doors.
"It looks as though it's searching for something,"
he shouted.
"Then getting away before it finds it is a first-class idea, don't you think?"
A tongue of fire hit the dark tower of art, slid blindly down its ivy-grown flanks, and disappeared through the dome of Unseen University's library. The other lines blinked out. Lady Ramkin brought the coach to a halt at the far side of the square. "What does it want a library for?" she said, frowning.
Maybe it wants to look something up.
"Don't be silly," she said breezily. "There's just a lot of books in there. What would a flash of lightning want to read?"
Something very short.
"I really think you could try to be of a bit more help."
The line of light exploded into an arc between the library's dome and the center of the plaza and hung in the air, a band of brilliance several feet across. Then, in a sudden rush, it became a sphere of fire which grew swiftly to encompass almost all the plaza, vanished suddenly, and left the night full of ringing violet shadows, and the plaza full of dragons.